Hello, this is a brief video to talk about productivity and to really define what is productivity and the ramifications of how it can be applicable to the hotel industry and how we manage our hotels. If you look up productivity on Google and just look up the definition, really what we're interested in here is the second definition of productivity, which is the effectiveness of productive effort, especially in industry, as measured in terms of the rate of output per the unit of input. So we're looking at rate of output per unit of input. So really what we're talking about here, generally as we look at hotels, are hours as compared to occupied rooms. Or if we're looking at a restaurant or a catering or a banquet department, we're looking at hours per covers. So generally we're looking for our units that we're dividing by here are occupied rooms or covers. So again, key financial terms we've talked about in previous videos, ADR, RevPAR, and those key stats. And here, we have cost factors like food costs and cost of sales and controllables, items like guest supplies or hospitality or comp services and so forth. But the focus of this is really productivity and looking at labor, staffing levels, and how it relates to our occupied rooms and so forth generated. I think the easiest way to do so is just to jump right into an actual example. So as we look into a quick, quiz or a look at this, if we were to say, here's Hotel M example that has room sales budgeted of $100,000, F&B of 50, and total sales of 150. We have some profit budget items, and then we have occupied rooms budgeted. And hours budgeted. So if we wanted to understand what these key stats that we just talked about are, the question is how do we come up with those? So again, if you're interested in ADR, RevPAR, I refer you to an earlier video. But on this, we'll focus just on productivity. So if we wanted to understand what productivity was, we can see here that the answer is 85 or 0.85. I'm sorry, but the way we arrived at that is if you take rooms hours and divide them by occupied rooms. So we can see that the rooms hours that were budgeted were 850 and the occupied rooms that were budgeted were 1,000. So that would suggest that for every occupied room that we have, we budgeted 0.85 hours to be used. Now that's important for a lot of reasons. One, rarely will we ever hit budgeted sales. So if we budgeted exactly $100,000, if we come in at exactly $100,000 in room sales or occupied rooms, if we come in exactly at 1,000 occupied rooms, then we would know that we could use exactly 850 hours. But if that number changes at all, then you have to come up with this ratio to be able to understand how much you should adjust these other factors. So again, to come up with the 0.85, you just divide the you divide the hours by the occupied rooms. So now that with that knowledge in mind, we can look at a question. If you're budgeted 1,000 hours for use in whatever area, so we could say front office for the month of May, but you actually only use 900 hours as the department leader for this area, does that mean you did better or worse than budget, and why? Did you perform better than expectation or worse than expectation? And for most of us, we would say, oh, that's better because you beat your budget. You did better than budget by 100 hours. But the true answer is it depends, because we need to know how many actual the rooms that we did. We need to understand how many that came in relative to budget as well. So knowing the additional information with the same example, if budget was 1,000 occupied rooms and we were budgeted 1,000 hours for the front office, but now we know that we actually had 800 occupied rooms, but we still used 900 hours. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, or how does that adjust? Well, that same math that we just went through, we can calculate here. So we can take the budgeted occupied, the budgeted room or front office hours here, which is 1,000, divide it by the occupied rooms, which happens to be 1,000 in this example as well, which gives us a productivity of exactly 1. If we take that productivity of 1 and multiply it by the actual rooms that we incurred, which were 800, that gives us 800 hours that we would use. So budgeted productivity times your actual rooms gives you the limited or the new adjusted budgeted productivity hours amount. So that would be 800. So we now know that if we actually had a budget limit of 800, but we use 900, if we do 800 minus 900, we can see now that we actually ended the month 100 hours worse than budget based on the ratio analysis that we just performed. So applying the productivity measurement, we can see that even though we may have thought we were better by 100 hours, we were actually worse by 100 hours. We can take that math further and times that $100 by your average wage rate, which would then suggest that we ended the month $1,000 worse than budget in actual wages. So as you're preparing your critique or your explanation on productivity, if these are the actual results, then that's how you would describe it. You would say, we were worse than budget by 100 hours, and then you would describe why. If you're still in the month, then you would reach this. This would be your target that you would achieve. You would strive to achieve. So you wouldn't want to come in at 900 hours, but you would take necessary action to come in at the relative 800 hours. This is all about, fixed and variable costs. There's some departments that have fixed costs and have set schedules, but really those departments that have a variable cost, like a housekeeping department would have a very variable cost that you would want to measure. So it's important to understand what the nature of your department is, whether it's fixed or variable. And for those items that are variable, we really want to focus on making sure that we react accordingly and collapse our business, or grow our business depending on what the demand is. Again, you can see here, there's just a brief table that we rarely actually hit the budget items. So I've just put a table in here that shows you the sensitivity analysis that if your sales go up, your hours that you're able to use go up as well, where you're able to be in the clear and stay above the productivity line. So this does it as a sensitivity of wage margin, but again, it's just helpful that if you're interested, you could sit with your accounting team and build a sensitivity analysis or a table like this where you could just populate in your hours and it would show you kind of the range that you need to hit to stay within the realm of budget. There's also, Atlas tools you can use to make sure that you're just staying in line. But hopefully this helps you understand what productivity is overall. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I'm in Outlook under Daryl Reed, and my last name is spelled with an H. Thank you and have a nice day.